see this PowerPoint?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So first is the sustainability point. We are trying to see how our energy portfolio is going to be a sustainable one, and that we must know which source is giving us the better return in terms of land, because we have plenty of land, we have plenty of sunshine, we have plenty of coal, but very limited land. So there are competing demand with other energy sources, while nuclear turns out to be the most efficient one in the land basis, but somehow our share in the nuclear is not that much. That means we'll have high pressure on the land for meeting our energy resources. The second is the emission wise, we have to see which is more efficient one. Unfortunately, coal, on which we have been relying, is the most polluting one, and the nuclear again is the clear winner because it is the least polluting one. But we have taken a path of renewables, rather variable renewables, VRE, and how it shapes that we'll discuss later. Now coming to the cost of power, how it is going to come up, we have to consider what are the different options available before us, and in that context, I'm quoting this Lazard's levelized cost of electricity in dollars per megawatt. It is not available for India, but it is available for US and other countries. So we can see still coal works out to be the cheapest one as a RTC basis. It's only about $168 per megawatt hour in comparison to the solar utility scale solar plus storage, which is 210. Of course, these figures will undergo a bit change because their coal is of higher calorific value and ours is lower. So all these changes will there, but this gives us a relative cost-wise structure. And next is the resource penetration, how we are shaping up our resources over the years. So currently, we see that the share of nuclear will be marginally going up in 2047. Coal will be drastically coming down by almost 80%. Currently, it is about 49%. It is expected to go down to 11%. Gas is going to reduce by 90%. Almost 5.7% is the share in capacity, which will come down to almost 0.5%. And the major increase is expected in the wind and solar sources. Wind will become double to 21 and solar will become 58% of the capacity. In terms of storage, this is the share. So the VRE share in capacity is 79%, almost 80% share in terms of capacity is for 2047 will be the VRE. We are getting confused. Renewable energy and VRE not the same. It is only solar wind. That means we will have more variability. And the inertial share is coming down to 20%. It will have serious impact on our grid stability in terms of how we are going to balance it, what are the instruments we are going to use, and all those things. So we have to take note of this. And this is the pictorial depiction of what I just mentioned, that coal share coming down, solar and wind going up. And this is again the pictorial depiction of share of VRE and inertial share. VRE going up and inertial share coming down. What is the optimal storage which is required? For low VRE scenario, normally BESS is preferred for short duration, and for high VRE scenario, pump storage is more preferred because it gives you long duration. However, maybe because of the geological constraint and otherwise, our pump storage is only limited to 5.68 in 2047. Now comes the electricity generation aspect, where the energy will be provided. Again, the share of different sources of energy, nuclear, while it will be going up to 6.76%, which is good. Coal will be coming down from 3.4 to less than around 18%. And wind and solar will gain, wind will gain almost 4.5 times and solar will almost 7 times. 7 times it will increase. The VRE share has been projected to be kept at 65% in this 4582 billion units projected to be generated in 2047. So these figures, why I am using, because that will give us the seriousness or the complexity which is likely to arise in future, and whether the current instruments which we are using, current set of laws and rules and regulation, whether they are going to help us or not. This is again a pictorial depiction of VRE sharing generation. Now, when we are talking about variability and whatever capacity we plan, we have to be also mindful that it is not constant. Forget about day, even during the month wise, it is not constant. I am using the data of month wise solar generation. This data has been taken from CE only. We can see that in the month of November, the solar generation last year was 7.8 billion unit, and in the month of March, these are the highest and lowest. So when you plan, even if you take a capacity contribution, you are taking flat for a whole year. So this aspect is not captured in that capacity credit method perhaps. So we have to think whether the capacity credit method is going to work for a high VRE scenario or not. Variability in wind is almost double the solar variability. This is again figure of month-wise generation taken from CEA for 23-24. Only 5 months we have got some stable wind generation. Rest 7 months the wind generation is very, very less, and the highest lowest ratio is almost 1:3, or 1:4 rather. So this type of variation is on month to month, and capacity credit, whether it is going to address or not, forget about resource penetration method. This is again a summary of what is going to be share energy and capacity. Now, how does this impact the levelized cost of energy? I'm using for a similar resource penetration data available for USA to compare how their different sources are costing. So this is again from Lazards. If you see in 2047, our VRE capacity mix, solar is provisioned to be 58% and wind is provisioned to be 20%. And there are 5 ISO data I have available, and the nearest one I could locate is CAISO, California ISO, which has currently 2024, they have 52% solar penetration, and wind penetration is almost same, wind is same. So CAISO, if we take CAISO, the solar cost of firmed up supply cost is $153, while the solar standalone cost is $49 per megawatt hour. So almost twice the standalone cost of solar is being used to firm up that supply. This of course will not be same for India. It depends upon the type of balancing which is done, whether it is done through storage, battery storage, or pump storage, or gas. So it all depends, but this gives you a magnitude of increase in the levelized cost of energy when we use this high level of VRE. Similarly, for wind, $80 is their standalone cost, which becomes $177. So that is the reason you will find that even in USA, California has got very high energy charges, almost 30 cents an unit. Whereas other states which are Texas, if we see ERCOT, Texas is using a balance. They have a good level of renewable, but it is balanced. Solar is only 21% and wind is 44%. With that, they have been able to contain their levelized cost of energy. So we have to be mindful in which direction we will be moving, because there is an international experience available. This is just to give a trend in what was there. It was there in 2023. 2023 solar was only 32% in California and prices were less, and same was with the wind. So as you add variability, the prices keep on increasing. And this is a comparative from where to where last 2 years data I have used. And rise is again due to firming reasons, how it is being firmed up. Now projected per capita electricity availability. Currently we are about 1250. This 1250 is 1/3 of the global average. Global average is 3600 kilowatt hours. So currently we are 1/3. And in 2047, the per capita, the total electricity generation will be 4582. And the population is projected to be 1.6 billion. So we will not be reaching even the current global average even in 2047. So we will be paying a very, very high cost for this high level of VRE. I'm not against environment, but I'm saying that we have to follow some path which is sustainable for the national goals. Now again, let's see how the developed countries, they are positioned 25 years before their net zero commitment. Say almost all the European countries, they have given their net zero commitment in 2050, except for Sweden and Germany. And what is their VRE share? Except for Denmark, which is a very small, tiny country with only 35 billion unit of total consumption, all are having around 30-40% of VRE share 25 years before NZC, net zero commitment. What we are planning, 27 is our net zero commitment year. In 2047, which is 23 years before that, we are planning 65%. We are taking a route steeper than what the Europeans or even China or USA have not taken. China is only 13% in VRE currently against our 11, and USA is 14%. So, what is the compulsion? Why we are taking such a high VRE roadmap? That is, we must discuss, because the country is going to pay a heavy cost in terms of economic development by making the energy expensive. This is just to compare why Denmark is there. So Denmark is very small, so there is no point. Now, again, important factor which will contribute to the cost of power is the VRE penetration and relationship with it PRM, that is planning reserve margin. Now, we are talking in terms of 15-20% planning reserve margin. But the VRE content which we are having is more than 50%. It is 65% in energy terms and 80% in capacity terms. And for that, the PRM should be more than 30%. So, for a projected peak demand of 363 in 2032 and this PRM, we should have 472 capacity available with capacity credit system, and 697,906 should be available with us in capacity credit terms. I did a simulation with different software. I don't have access to Ordano or Plexos, but I did with a fairly more accurate, which does the probabilistic analysis. And it shows basically that while we are able to meet our solar peak demand very comfortably with the given resource penetration in high VRE scenario, because of storage is also going to help us, and the capacity factor is also contributing. But this is for the solar peak period. That means if the 697 megawatt, which is the estimated peak for 2047, we can safely meet it. And the 95% probability is that we will meet it with a very good margin. However, for non-solar period, there is a huge risk. The huge risk is that there will be not effective PRM. In fact, there is a 5% chance of not meeting the during the dark doldrum period. Dark doldrum is when there is a double sort of whammy in terms of there is no sunlight and the wind is also not there. So there is hardly anything which is available from the VRE sources. So this is one factor the simulation told this thing. Now, coming to the emission of the grid, is very, very heartening to see that the emission will be drastically coming down currently from 0.73 kg CO2 to 0.2, which is a very good number, and it will help us in decarbonizing the grid. And the real benefit of grid decarbonization and sectoral coupling comes only with around 0.5, because the electric vehicles currently do not offer any environmental benefit because they are fed by the coal based grid. So we will have definitely an environmental friendly scenario supported in the grid. Now, coming to the good part of the grid, it enhances the energy security by reducing dependence on our fossil fuel and mitigated the price volatility, exceed our NDC commitment of 50% non-fossil fuel, reduces our emission intensity, fast track, we are following a trajectory which is steeper than the developed nation, and rapidly it will decarbonize the grid. However, the challenging part is again managing the grid with a very high intermittency and variability. On the energy equity front, the trilemma of energy, security, equity, and environment. Environment is addressed, equity is partially addressed, security is addressed, equity is partially addressed in the sense that it improves the per capita electricity availability marginally. But on affordability front, it doesn't meets that criteria. So on trilemma, it meets 2 and maybe half point we don't meet. There is a shortage from growth, developed nation ambition. There is definitely 2,850 kilowatt hour is far less than the current global average as well as the range of developing nations per capita energy consumption. Another big issue which I realized was that there is an institute known as National Institute of Solar Energy under the MNRE, which has estimated that the total solar potential is about 784 gigawatts. And against that, the 2047 the plan is not a draft, it's not a resource adequacy, it's a draft, has projected about 1186 gigawatt. So which is almost 50% more than the national potential. So how this will come out, I didn't have much details about that because I couldn't attend that October brainstorming, so I can't comment on that. Then excessive solarization will lead to solar cannibalization. The investment will not come because there will be too much of solar during the day, the prices will not become remunerative, and there will be solar cannibalization and also curtailment if there is not adequate storage. There will be land diversion from agriculture to solar wind because almost 25,000 square kilometer of land will be required to meet this projected target. Pump storage and battery storage, there is a round trip efficiency loss which will amount to about 3%. This is just notional, but is a figure I thought must be kept in mind. PRM I have already discussed on the dark doldrum nights. And what else? Yes, the biggest issue here is that whatever we are planning is based on the historical. There is no, because our structure of demand side is not captured. There is a serious lack of granular high resolution data from the system operator, and there is no net load data consideration, because whenever we are planning, we have to plan based on what is the net load after taking into account the variable renewable energy, etc., etc. That data is somehow missing in the whole exercise. Unless until we bring out that, our calculations are going to be very, very different. And maybe to begin with, we can move with capacity credit, because best is the worst if we do not start at all. So maybe we can start with capacity credit, but over the next few years, we have to migrate to a different method, which is ELCC. Why? I'll just tell you. Net load ramping requirement needs to be analyzed, and grid inertia needs to be analyzed. Demand side flexibility has already been mentioned. Just transition. When you are taking out such a huge capacity of coal, which gives employment to more than 10 million people, we have to plan whether the same sort of employment is also created in the new scenario. And it's a very, very milky source of revenue for the government. Annually gives more than 75,000 crore. Besides revenue is only the tax part of it. So whether the government is going to come up with something else or not. Now, why we need ELCC, that is effective load carrying capability, and not capacity credit method? Because we are going to have a very high level of VRE. And the capacity credit method is only suited for basic sort of structure with a VRE share less than 30%. But 30% we have already breached. So from that perspective, it is better. But ELCC is very, very complex. we need very sophisticated computer models and requires training, etc., which is going to take time. So maybe till such time we have got ELCC in place and our system operator nudge to make the disclosure of these high resolution datas, granular datas to the planners. Till such time perhaps we can carry on with the capacity credit method, but ultimately next 3, 4 or maybe 5 years we should switch over to ELCC method. Otherwise our planning is going to go haywire. And if you are expecting DISCOMs to make fixed contract capacity for next 25 years, we are asking too much of risk for them. So what we should do, again, start with granular data and net load data, ELCC method, limit the VRE resource penetration to 60% only. There's no benefit the country will get by taking a very steep VRE and VRE scenario. Target per capita at least 4,000 kilowatt hours so that we are somewhere near the developed nation ambition, and align our net zero carbon path. Don't make it steeper. Front loading is double whammy in the sense you land up with obsolete, inefficient technology which blocks your capacity to employ them for the next future. So there's no advantage in going in for a steeper VRE scenario. Focus should be nuclear SMR because they are most efficient, and offshore wind to reduce pressure on land. SVDC we are already talking about. Gas base for ramping up, and the ratio of solar wind has to be strategically allocated because of the transmission associated cost. And the investment in flexible infrastructure is there to capture the demand side of resource, because this is only supply side resource. The capacity credit method is only supply side resource, and there are a lot of other items which need to be brought into the demand side. Storage is there, behind the meter storage, smart grid NMI, flexible generation, etc., etc. Grid expansion, smart metering is already talked about. Yes, market mechanism is one which is going to bring in. Just because we have a plan, nobody is going to put in money. There is already, we are seeing that the renewable energy segment is under a lot of stress because there are issues, the capacity of the distribution company to buy those power, and there is a reluctance from the developers to also put in lot money. So we need a total restructuring of market mechanism, how we are operating our current market. The market share is only hardly 7%, and rest is either long-term PPA or 7% is OT, over the counter trade. That needs to substantially change. The share of market has to go up, and DISCOM should not be forced to go in for long-term contract. They should have the liberty to rationalize, work out their need and take a medium to short-term assessment. Because the guideline says that you contract 70 to 75% by long-term PPA. I think the implementability is going to be a questionable one. Introduce dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing is one, unless until to begin with we introduce in the wholesale and then gradually bring it down to the retail level, it is not going to help. So for that we need to go in for a structural change in the market mechanism. And incentive is, this I have already talked about, critical pricing, time of use tariff. So these are the regulatory changes which needs to be brought in from dynamic pricing. And capacity building for stakeholders is already discussed about, and institutional capacity strengthening, this is already discussed. Yes, new financial products need to be brought into. First is that the products like contract for differences. This is widely used elsewhere, where the contracts are offered to the developer that this is the strike price, and any fall below that in the market price will be compensated by the government, and if you get more than that in the market, that will be taken away. That has been a very effective way of making the investment in a secure manner. And introduction of forward market. We are operating in 3 months forward market, and I don't know what is happening. Proposal to introduce 11-month market is still pending for more than 2 years, despite the GNA has been introduced and all those things. So those things need to be pushed into derivatives by the financial market for hedging, and this is, I think there are plenty of things we need to be thought about. It is too short a time to express each and every point, but long and short